everyone, my name is Gabby and today I'm going to be bringing you part 3 of my Back to Booktube series, and in this video I'm going to be discussing all the movies and TV shows I've been watching as well as all the music that I've been listening to over the past 3 months. If you would like to check out the previous 2 videos in this series where I discuss all the books that I've been reading and all the things that I've been doing in March, April, and May, both those videos are live on my channel now for you to watch, and the links will be down below in the description of this video for you to go and check them out. But without further ado, we're going to dive into discussing all the other content that I've taken in March, April, and May of 2018. So first things first, we're going to start out by discussing television shows, and I have 4 of these to discuss with you, the first of which is Season 2 of Riverdale. So I discussed a small chunk of Season 2 of Riverdale on my channel already in one of my previous wrap-ups, but the show came back from hiatus in March and then wrapped up its season in May. So now that I've seen the entire second season, I figured I might as well discuss it as a whole with you here. Honestly, for the most part, Season 2 of Riverdale really didn't do a lot for me, and I feel like that was particularly because I had a different viewing experience watching Season 2 compared to Season 1. I binge watched all of Season 1 on Netflix a little bit over a year ago, and I finished it in the matter of a few days, but with Season 2, I started watching it while it was airing in the fall of 2017, and so I'm having to wait each week for a new episode, plus sit through several hiatuses. This season was also double the length, which meant more content that I had to take in, which meant the season was going to naturally be longer. A lot of that waiting was really frustrating, considering the fact that this is a show that's really intense and gripping and has lots of plot twists and cliffhangers, and it's one of those shows where once you start watching, you can't stop and you just get roped into the world, into the characters, into the story. It sucks to have to wait, and especially for a lot of the second season, because I was doing lots of waiting, the plot didn't particularly stick with me, and it just felt sort of meh for a large part of it. And I feel like that was particularly because I was kind of disappointed with the way that the first half of the second season wrapped up, and so having that attitude and being sort of frustrated by it, I naturally went into the second half and felt sort of about it. But that all being said, I do have to say that the show did make a comeback, and the Carrie episode was the thing that really sold it for me. So Riverdale decided to do a musical episode, and they decided to do Carrie, which I think was the absolute best decision that this show could have ever made. I know the creative team and the writers were talking about doing Little Shop of Horrors, which I feel like would have been equally wonderful, but I feel like for the particular plotline that the writers wanted to tell and where they wanted to take the characters, Carrie was just perfect because it meshes so perfectly with the world of Riverdale, where it feels like they could be the exact same thing. Like, it almost just felt like they were doing a musical episode. It really didn't even feel that Carrie-esque because the world of Carrie just, like I said, fits so seamlessly in the world of Riverdale, and it was just so perfect. I loved the music and the choreography and everything. It was just absolutely stunning, and the ending of that episode completely and entirely had me shook. It had me on the edge of my seat. I literally was sitting in my recliner in my living room, and I jumped out of my recliner. I was like screaming at the television, and I was like, thank God, this is what I've been waiting for. This is exactly what I wanted for Riverdale. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and Riverdale is finally delivered, and thank God, because that episode and every episode onward until the finale was absolutely stunning. Some of my favorite episodes of Riverdale yet, and this Carrie episode was exactly what the writers needed to pick this show back up and give it some oomph and get people excited about the world and the story and the characters once again, and I was just so happy and pleased with it. But if we are going to talk about the rest of this second season, we have to talk about that penultimate episode, because oh my God, that episode got Riverdale trending, I believe #1 worldwide, maybe, on Twitter. Everyone and their mother was screaming about the ending of this episode, myself included. I literally had to go and call my friend and be like, you watched this episode of Riverdale, right? You saw the ending, please console me, because I am genuinely scared out of my mind about what this ending means. I was terrified and completely and entirely just like shaking, and that entire episode was nuts. Like, wrenches were thrown, things were turned on its head, and it was just Riverdale to the core, and I absolutely loved it. I also hated it at the exact same time because this show could not have picked a worse time to air this episode. I had to sit through in conclusion of that penultimate episode and had to wait an entire week to get to the finale. That was also the same week I was going to be taking my 2 AP tests, so I did not need to have this episode on my mind annoying me, because genuinely for several days I kept thinking about the ending, trying to console myself, and it was horrible. But you know, as a writer, you're doing something right if you're causing all of this mass hysteria with a show like this. That's a big huge indicator that you're getting your fan base riled up and that they're getting into it and they're getting invested. So as much as I hated it, I also loved it at the same time, and props to the writers room for that episode because it was absolutely a masterpiece. And the finale was good. I enjoyed it. There definitely were some cliffhangers and some twists and things, but it was enough to be able to console me and enough for me to be like, okay, okay, this is cool, I'm fine, I can wait for season 3, I'm intrigued, but it wasn't enough to leave me like physically in pain like the penultimate episode was. Props to Riverdale for bringing it back, such a good show. But one last thing before we move on to the next show, we have to talk about Machen Amick, who plays Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper was a character for me that really didn't particularly stand out. I really didn't like her character, wasn't really too invested in her storyline or anything going on with her, but as we started to get towards the end of the second season, her performance in the Carrie episode, every episode onward, was absolutely stunning. The writers gave her such good material, and she delivered and gave the performance of her life. I was speechless watching her. She had so many emotional moments that she just delivered and really caught my attention, and I feel like the adults on the show do not get enough appreciation for their performances in this show, and she in particularly really caught me off guard. I absolutely adore her. I think she's such a phenomenal performer, and I loved seeing what she did in these last few episodes, and I'm very excited to see where the writers take her plotline in season 3. So season 1 and 2 of Riverdale are on Netflix for you to go and binge watch, which you should totally do because this show is the perfect show to binge watch. It's so good, so fast paced, so intense. You're gonna get roped in just like I did. So please go and watch it and prepare yourself for season 3, which now has an air date on October 10th, 2018. Riverdale season 3 will be coming back, and I am so excited. As I mentioned before, the first 2 seasons are up on Netflix for you to go and binge watch, which you should totally do. Fall in love with Riverdale as I did, friend, and then if you have watched Riverdale, leave your thoughts and opinions down below on the show so we can fangirl about it together because it's such a good show, and I'm so glad I finally started watching it. Moving on to our next show, which we are very briefly going to gloss over because it got canceled after 1 season, which I'm super bitter about, and that is Rise. So the show was on NBC. I'm assuming you don't know about it because it got canceled after 1 season, which tells me there really wasn't a lot of people watching it, which is incredibly disappointing because I feel like a lot of people would have loved this show had they known about it. So Rise takes place in Philadelphia at a high school called Stanton, and we follow our central character, Mr. Mazu, who is an English teacher played by Josh Radnor, who you may know as Ted from How I Met Your Mother. And Mr. Mazu's been teaching at Stanton for several years, and he feels unfulfilled. His students really don't care. They've sort of lost their interest, and he wants to be able to make an impact on his students. He wants to be able to feel like he's doing something as a teacher, like he is giving back. And so what he decides to do is take the empty position in the school's drama department and put on Spring Awakening. So if you know anything about Spring Awakening, it is a very controversial show and deals with a lot of very dark topics. So naturally the school board and parents are not going to be too pleased when they find out that the show is being put on and that students are having to work with this material. And so this whole show follows the obstacles that Josh Radnor has to face, or his character, Mr. Mazu, has to face rather, in putting this show on. So not only is that dealing with budget problems and not really having enough money to even put the show on, and having to deal with old equipment, and also having to deal with all the complaints of the school board who are trying to change this musical and completely and entirely remove it of its essence, and all the parents who are complaining and are not happy that the show is being put on. But he has to face all of these obstacles also while trying to inspire all the students that are involved in this show. And he gets people who've never been involved in musical theater before invested in this show, and people who are theater veterans have a different experience with the show than they've had with any of their other shows because it personally impacts them. And the show has so many wonderful diverse plot lines that I feel like were so important for people to see on television, and that's why I wish the show would have gotten a second season, because it could have explored these themes and others in a lot more depth. For one, there is a trans character that is played by a binary actor, and I believe also a trans actor, which is representation that you never see on television anymore. There are characters that come from low-income families that have single parents, so you're seeing all different types of family situations represented. There's characters of all different ethnicities and backgrounds that are brought into the story, and you get to see how that sort of impacts their involvement in the musical and telling the story and feeling like an outsider but still being able to be involved in this show and be able to bring their talents to light regardless of what it is that their ethnicity is, because they're sort of like afraid and sort of hiding in the shadows and being able to accept who they are and be proud of that. There's also a character that comes from a religious family that is sort of questioning his sexuality, and the whole story explores him being able to feel comfortable in his skin and come out while also sort of having to worry about what his parents may think and wanting to be a proper son and wanting his family to be proud of him while also having to come to terms with who he is. And that's a plotline that I feel like a lot of teenagers are going through and can relate relate to, and I thought that plotline was incredibly well executed. Obviously, I really can't personally speak to it, but I thought at least watching it, it was incredibly well executed, and each and every storyline in this show was told with such care, and I really, really loved the show for that. It was just so much fun to watch. Genuinely, I got so excited to watch each episode each week because it was so well done and just made my heart feel so happy. As a theater student, the show deeply, deeply resonated with me. I loved the entire cast, and I found so many new and wonderful actors, and I'm now really excited to see where they go with their career in the future. People who told this story with so much grace and beauty, and I'm just so happy I got to watch the show. And the 10 episodes are there, and they're definitely going to stick with me forever, and they are there for you to watch too. You should definitely go back and watch Rise if you haven't watched it yet, because it's such a beautiful and touching show that has such diverse plot lines, and I feel like this is a show that a lot of people would really love if they had found out about it. So it's definitely there for you to watch. You should go and watch it and be touched by this show just as much as I was. So this next show, I was just sort of gonna gloss over because we all know how I feel about this show. It's really not my favorite in the world, but things happen, and now we have a reason to discuss the show a little bit more in depth, and that show is Shadowhunters. Season 3A started airing in March and then wrapped up in May, but before we discuss that, we're kind of going to rewind for a second. So I reviewed all of Season 1 on my channel, all of Season 2A, and the first 2 episodes of Season 2B, and then I completely gave up on reviewing the show just because I lost interest. Like, I genuinely did not want to waste my time and energy on the show and on making reviews because they would all be negative, and I thought that I could make a lot better content, so I gave up on doing Shadowhunter reviews, but I did not give up on watching the show. To talk about 2B very briefly, typical Shadowhunters. There were episodes that were really good, but the good moments that the show had were outweighed by all of the really problematic aspects that the writers have just never taken the time to fix. It's hard to enjoy those good moments when you're dealing with really cheesy dialogue and like plot structures and other things going on in the show that just don't make sense, and lack of consistency and a whole bunch of other problematic things, and just like where you're watching it and the CGI is really bad and just like reoccurring problems. It's hard to take those tiny little good moments and make them outweigh the bad when there's so much bad. Yeah, 2B was like typical Shadowhunters. I mean, what could you expect? So it did get better as it went along and as I stopped doing reviews, but you know, like it wasn't like anything where I was like, suddenly there's this massive change. Like, no. Bad. But then I did watch Season 3A, and the first episode was actually pretty good to me. Like, it looked like there was an improvement in CGI, and the plot lines were being introduced, and I actually thought that they were pretty well done, especially the one with Jace and some of the things that were going on with him in City of Fallen Angels. Like, they brought that in. I thought that it was actually relatively well executed, and that intrigued me because I had never seen Shadowhunters actually take one of Cassie's plot lines and execute it correctly and actually tell it the way that it should be told. So I was caught off guard. I was like, this episode isn't actually that bad. Is Shadowhunters suddenly made a massive improvement? Have I just finally, after years of hoping that the show would get better, am I finally going to be fulfilled? No, I am not. 15 minutes into the second episode of Season 3A, I'm automatically disappointed, and the show progressively gets worse from there. And I'm officially done giving up hope on the show. And you want to know why? Freeform canceled Shadowhunters! Guys, it's over, it's done! I finally don't have to sit through this show anymore! It's the worst! But I still keep watching it because I have to hate watch it. I can't not watch it. But the show has been canceled, and let's tell a little story here about how I found out. So the show got canceled on Monday, June 4th. That was the day before I was leaving to go to Washington, D.C. and the surrounding Virginia area on vacation. So I was spending that whole day packing, and I really wasn't on my phone that much. But that Tuesday, when I'm about to take off on my flight, I'm on my computer and I'm pulling my friend's Twitter links to put in the description for one of my videos that I wanted to pre-upload before I went to D.C. I look through Twitter, I read Dom Sherwood's tweet because it was at the top of my Twitter feed. I read it once, I read it a second time, I scroll down and read some other tweets, and I find out that Shadowhunters was canceled by Freeform. I just was shooketh because I thought the show was genuinely gonna go on forever and I was just gonna have to sit through it and that it would eat me alive because I hated it so much. Genuinely, I thought after 3A that I was gonna give up because I was so done. But now, I just have to sit through all of 3B and then a finale episode that Freeform gave Shadowhunters, and it should be done like summer 2019. So it's finally gonna be over and I'm so happy. And here's the thing, I love the cast. I think they're a great group of people. I think they deserve better. I think that they just were not given really good writers or people creatively that could develop this show to actually make it worth watching. I feel bad, and I knew a lot of them before they even came into Shadowhunters, and they're a great group of people, and I'm excited to see what they do future projects wise, but I'm just glad that this show is done and over with. But the only other problematic aspect is that, for one, now that the writers know how much time they have left, they're gonna try to get through all the rest of Cassie's books and they're gonna mush everything together and it's gonna make everything worse. So I'm not expecting the show to get any better. If anything, it's gonna be horrific, but I'm just gonna watch it so it's done, it's over with, and I don't have to deal with it anymore. But there is also the very, very, very slim chance that the show could get picked up. I don't think Rise is getting picked up at all. There was a petition for that show to get picked up. It's been about a month. I don't think it's gonna get picked up, and I'm sad because it's a show that I actually do think should get picked up because it's actually relatively good. But Shadowhunters does have a large fan base of people who actually really like this show for whatever reason. It could get picked up. It wouldn't surprise me if it did get picked up, and I'd be interested to see if another network picked it up, how that would help improve the show at all, if it would improve at all. So I wouldn't be opposed to it getting picked up. I'm very happy to see it gone and done with. That is not a lie at all, and I don't feel bad about that at all. That's my own opinion, and I am entitled to that. But if it did get picked up, depending on where it ended up, maybe I would watch it. I'd be interested to see if a new network would maybe help the show improve. I don't know. But for now, we're glad Shadowhunters is dead and gone, and that in the spring of 2019, we can finally put this show behind us and move on to better television. And so one last book to screen adaptation that I watched this month, TV show wise, was 13 Reasons Why Season 2. So wherever you look, left or right, there is somebody that has an opinion on this show, good or bad. Honestly, after watching the second season and the first season as well, I can say that I can see both sides. I understand how a lot of people really aren't happy with the show because it romanticizes suicide and it has lots of really graphic and triggering content, in that it really can't reach the audience that it's trying to reach because of that content. But then I also understand the side where there are people that watch the show and have gone through things that have been impacted by it and think that it's important that the show is at least starting conversation and getting people talking, and that in itself is enough to make the show worth watching, and the fact that it's doing a lot of things that a lot of other shows wouldn't even bother to do. I think really genuinely this show is so controversial because it just depends entirely on your viewing experience and the type of person that you are watching the show and what type of things you've gone through in your own life and how that impacts the way that you take in the show and the way that you view the content. And so for me, I'm able to watch the show with an open mind. I'm just watching it creatively to sort of see what decisions have the writers made, why are they trying to tell the story in the way that they are, and trying to view it objectively. And I have to say that the second season did have some pretty triggering content, but I think that it's covering very, very serious topics, and I feel like it's making the attempt that a lot of other shows will not, and I think that that's important, and I'm glad that the show is here and that it exists to start that conversation. I personally was able to take in that content, and I wasn't able to be too severely impacted by it, but one of the things that I would say is that if you are somebody who can't watch the show because of the triggering content, but you still want to be able to be in the loop with the show, you want to be able to know what decisions the writers are making, why they're doing what they're doing, and maybe you're okay with spoilers. One of the things I would also check out, which I watched after watching season 2 of 13 Reasons Why, is Beyond the Reasons. And this is a companion show that the writers have made in which they sort of talk about their creative process in creating the show. And what they did for the episode that relates to season 2 is it's about an hour long, and there's different panels with actors on the show and writers of the show and creative specialists that were brought in to help with writing the scripts. Each panel has to do with a big major theme in this show, and the writers discuss why they made certain decisions that they did and why creatively they felt that it was in their best interest in terms of the story that they wanted to tell. And I feel like there's a lot of people that were really frustrated with the way that this show ended, and the writers very briefly go in and sort of explain why they made some of the decisions that they did in that finale episode. And I feel like it was definitely very helpful for me to sort of understand where they're coming from and why they made the decisions that they did. And they do discuss triggering content, but you don't actually see any of those images. So I feel like it would be a really good option for people to watch if they want to stay in the loop with the show, but they don't want to have to take in any of that triggering content. And I felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders in a way, and I felt a little bit more relieved after watching it because I felt like I could understand why certain things were done, and that made me feel just a little bit better as an audience member. So the show is getting a third season that is coming in 2019, and honestly, I don't really think this third season is necessary at all, but this is a show that's very highly discussed. There's people talking about it, and that in itself is enough to get this show a third season. It's making money and being talked about, and that's something that Netflix wants. They want shows that are going to make them money and profit and start conversation. I have absolutely no idea where the writers are going to go with this third season. I definitely feel like gun violence is going to be a big thing. I thought that was something they were going to get into in the second season, and it came just very briefly towards the end of the finale, so I think that's definitely going to maybe be their main focus, but I'll be be very intrigued to see what the writers do. I really don't know how much more they can do with this third season, how much more they can milk it, but there's people that are watching it, there's an audience there, so I'm definitely gonna watch season 3. I'm gonna be interested to see what the writers do, and I'm glad the show is out there and starting a conversation. I definitely think it was worth my watch, but I understand everyone's opinions, and I think everyone's entitled to their own opinions on this show. Moving on to movies, we have a pretty long list to get through. The first one that I have here to discuss with you is Shrek the Musical. So this isn't so much a movie as it is like a special. Normally I probably wouldn't have watched this at all, but after doing my author interview with Ashley Posted, while she was signing stock for Andersons, we were talking about musicals, and this was one of the ones that came up in conversation. I knew that there was a recorded version on Netflix, and so I woke up the next morning after my interview and decided to watch it. So Shrek the Musical has a wonderful cast. There's Brian Darcy James, Sutton Foster, and Daniel Brecker, just to name a few. They all did an absolutely wonderful job in this show, but here's the thing. Going into this, I was kind of predisposed to not like it because I'm not a big Shrek person. I know I said it, unpopular opinion, but I'm not gonna take it back. For me, I really didn't grow up with Shrek, so it was never really my thing, and I wasn't into the humor of it, like the dirty ogre jokes and like the fart jokes. Like that stuff just isn't my type of humor. Also with Shrek having been turned into a meme, like that just turned me off from it more. So I knew this was gonna be something that wasn't gonna be right up my alley, but I did like the message of the musical. I thought it was cute. I thought the actors did a good job, and it was fun, but it wasn't anything that I was like super obsessed with like I am with other musicals. But I am glad that I got to see it because it's another musical that I can say that I saw, so I'm not particularly too enthralled with Shrek the Musical, but I am glad that I got the opportunity to watch it. So it's another musical I can say that I've seen and add to my bucket list, so I'm not unhappy about it. It just definitely wasn't for me. Next movie that I watched in March was Gifted. So this story was so sweet and wonderful. I don't know any of the characters' names off of the top of my head, but I know the actors, so that's the best way that I can describe this movie to you if you're unfamiliar with it. McKenna Grace is the female lead in this movie. She's like about 7 or 8 years old, and her character is a math genius, which makes sense because her mother was a math genius as well. Her mother committed suicide, and so she has been raised by her uncle, who is played by Chris Evans. He has homeschooled her and taken care of her because that's what his sister wanted. He ends up then sending her to a public school so that she can make friends, so that she can be a normal kid, and the public school system ends up finding out about her gifted math ability, and so they want to send her to this school where she can basically be a prodigy and be alongside other people who are math geniuses, so like college level or even more advanced of like a math class. Naturally, he does not want this because his entire goal in taking in McKenna Grace's character is that she be a normal kid, but he ends up getting sued for custody by his mother, and so his mother wants to take McKenna Grace in, send her off to this university, and basically strip away her childhood, and this whole story follows this struggle. Octavia Spencer's in this movie, and I love Octavia Spencer. She's one of my favorite humans on the planet. Every movie she's in automatically makes that film 10 times better. The story was so beautiful and emotional and heartwarming, and I just adored it. And this is a movie that I was not planning on watching, but I saw it on demand on DirecTV. I had to watch it because I'd seen previews, it looked cute, and I was very glad I decided to watch it because it was adorable. And I definitely recommend watching it if you do get the chance because it really moved me, and I was so glad that I got to watch it. So the next movie that I have to discuss is one that everyone on Booktube has been loving recently, and that is Love, Simon, which is based off of the book by Becky Albertalli. So I did not reread Simon vs. Homo Sapiens Agenda before going in to watch Love, Simon. Normally I do that with Booktube movie adaptations, but I wanted to just be able to go in and watch it and enjoy it and not feel like I needed to critique every little change that was made, and I really enjoyed Love, Simon. I thought that it really captured the essence of Becky's story, and there were changes that were made that really didn't bother me because I feel like they were smart creatively, and I didn't feel like anything was lost in the changes that were made, and the story was just so fun and sweet and heartwarming, and I just adored it like everybody else who watched it did. I think Love, Simon is going to be coming to Netflix, and if it does, I will definitely be watching it. I don't know if I'm going to buy it on DVD. I want to, but I have not done it yet. I probably could, and I may end up buying it on DVD because I normally buy all the Booktube movie adaptations that I really love on DVD. We'll see, but I loved Love, Simon. I'm definitely definitely going to be rewatching it sometime soon, and I'm so glad I got to see it in theaters. I actually got to watch it with my friend Emily and Ashley, who I talk about a lot on this channel, and it was super fun to get to see it with them because that just made the experience all the more exciting. I adored Love, Simon. It gets 5 out of 5 stars for me. I loved the cast. It was such a beautiful movie, and I loved all of the strong parental figures that were in this movie, whether it be like adults or teachers. Just, I feel like you do not see enough really strong parental figures in YA because they're either absent or they're just really horrible people and they're made out to be like the antagonists. And so it was nice to have that representation because there's lots of really wholesome parental moments in this film that I really enjoyed and felt was just really beautiful and uplifting to see on screen. So it was great. I loved it, and I could ramble about how wonderful this movie was for hours, but we're gonna move on. Next movie on this list is Wonder Woman. I'm not really a superhero person, but everyone had been screaming about Wonder Woman for now almost a year, and I had not seen it yet. And this was another movie that was on demand, and I was like, I need to watch this. And I did, and I really enjoyed it. I think one of the things that I thought was most interesting about Wonder Woman is that it took that entire narrative from the comics and from this world, Marvel, and meshed it so well with US history. And I never would have thought that those two worlds would have been able to collide together so perfectly, but it was so interesting to watch, like taking American history that I know really well for my own studies in AP US history and getting to see that mesh in with this new world that I really don't know because I'm, as I've mentioned, am not a superhero person, so I really knew nothing about Wonder Woman at all other than reading Leigh Bardugo's novel of Wonder Woman. And so it was interesting to see that play out. Gal Gadot and Chris Pine were wonderful together. I thought the dialogue, it was really humorous at times. And this was a movie that actually had a surprising amount of twists and turns and things that really kept me on the edge of my seat to the point where at the end of it, like I was crying and I was gasping and I was like really invested because I'm not a big superhero person. If I get invested in the plot at all of these movies, I know they're done well. And I know a whole bunch of people who really love this movie. I'm on board. I loved it. They're making a sequel, which I had absolutely no idea about, that I'm now really excited for. And talking about this movie again is getting me even more amped up. It was great. I loved Wonder Woman. And if you by some chance have not watched it yet, you should because it was really entertaining. Moving on to the next movie on this list, which is Heathers. And this is the original. I don't know if there's any remakes. I know there's like the Broadway version that happened, and I have not listened to the cast recording for that yet. But I did want to watch the original movie, which has Winona Ryder. Everybody loves Heathers, but it wasn't for me. I don't know what it was, but I felt like there was like some message that the writers wanted to send, but for whatever reason, like I couldn't pick up on it because there was too many weird things going on, and I was watching it and I was like, what on God's green earth is happening? And I couldn't get behind it, and it felt too weird to me, and I just like was watching it more like open-jawed and like in shock to the point where I was left speechless, and not like a good type of speechless, but like a bad type of speechless where I was like, I can't even get behind this because I just don't even know what's going on. And it just, for me personally, wasn't that great. And I think that there's been other films that have been done that take the topics and things explored in Heathers and do it a lot more justice and are much better at sort of getting a message and a point across. So for me, Heathers wasn't my favorite, but I'd be interested in listening to the Broadway cast recording, sort of seeing the changes that are made in the Broadway version, and maybe I would enjoy that more. It was okay. I mean, I gotta give Winona Ryder props because she's Winona Ryder, and like I enjoyed it, but just yeah, a little like too much for me, not my favorite. Next movie on this list, is Schindler's List. See what I did there? Okay. This movie deals with a lot of really dark stuff. It takes place during the World War II era and follows our main character Schindler. In the beginning of the movie, he actively wants to get in with all these Nazis. He wants to make profit, and he wants to start up his own factory, and he's in it for like money and greed and materialism. And so naturally he wants to get in with all of these bigger up Nazis so that he can be more profitable in his endeavors. But he ends up finding out about the concentration camps and a lot of the really horrible things that these people are doing, and he ends up becoming converted and creates Schindler's List, which is an endeavor that he takes on that helps to save a whole bunch of Jewish lives, and he ultimately ends up becoming more of a protagonist by the end of this film. So this was not a movie I actively chose to watch on my own. I watched it in my AP US history class after taking our AP test. We had several weeks left of class before the end of the year wrapped up, and so there really wasn't much left to teach because obviously you're wrapping everything up before the AP test so that you can go in and be prepared to take that test. We just had a period of time where we were like watching movies or just like doing whatever. We had an end of the year project we were working on. We as a class all decided to watch Schindler's List, and this is a movie that I've known about for a while but never have actually watched, and I'm so glad I finally got the chance to watch it because it does deal with such very serious material. It's one of those films that I feel like you feel more sophisticated for watching because it deals with such brutal material, and it does it in a way that really helps to describe what it is that went on and like give you an actual image to be able to put into words all of these things that we know about the concentration camps and the way that the Nazis treated the Jewish race. It definitely is a lot to take in, but I felt the movie was really well done. The movie is entirely in black and white except for some few selective moments where the filmmakers decide to use color, and I thought those moments were incredibly poignant and incredibly well done, and I absolutely loved watching those moments on screen. I thought that it was incredibly impactful, and I particularly liked the ending of the film because they had this moment where they had all of the real people that this film is inspired by because it is based off of a real story, and they had all the real people that were depicted in this film and their fictional counterparts on screen as they went and put rocks on Schindler's grave, and I thought that that was incredibly beautiful and incredibly haunting and such a phenomenal way to wrap up this film. Next thing that I have to discuss with you here isn't so much a movie, but I put it here because it's like longer than the span of a regular television show, but it kind of could fit in between, and that is Jesus Christ Superstar Live. So this is put on by NBC on Easter Sunday. I absolutely adored this production of Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical. Jesus Christ Superstar is one of those things where at its surface it can look incredibly sacrilegious, but the more that you dive deeper into the content and into the way that the narrative is being told, you realize that that can't possibly be true at all, and it's the most odd thing in the world to sort of come to that realization because it takes the narrative that we so know about Jesus Christ and that whole Easter weekend of Holy Thursday and the Last Supper and Good Friday and then his resurrection and just completely flips it on its head, but tells it in a way that is really, really poignant. And I just love watching this live version because the cast was wonderful. You have Sarah Bareilles as Mary Magdalene, John Legend as Jesus, and Brandon Victor Dixon as Judas, which, by the way, Brandon Victor Dixon as Judas, holy shit. I can't even begin to describe to you like how much he blew me away. Like the notes that that man can hit, oh my god, I can't even, like, he completely blew me away, and I was so excited to see him, and he was stunning. Shin Ha was also in Jesus Christ Superstar. He played Annas, who was one of the chief priests, high priests, so he's one of your antagonists. If you all know, because you've been watching some of my videos, I got to see Shin Ha as KG3 in the Chicago cast of Hamilton, and then to see him in Jesus Christ Superstar was so cool because I was literally telling everyone, hey, you see that guy? You see him? I got to see him in Hamilton, so that was kind of cool, and it felt like being a proud mom in a way. That sounds really weird, but that is the truth. I was so excited to see him, and I think he's back in Chicago now doing Hamilton, which I'm so happy about, and I absolutely adore him. He's a phenomenal performer, and I loved getting to see him. Norm Lewis was in the cast, so many people. Also, have to shout out the actor that played Pilate because he was stunning, and I loved the one big moment that he had with Jesus in this production. So good. This movie is out on DVD now for you to go and buy, which you should totally do if you haven't watched it yet. I loved it. I loved the ending. It was just so chilling, and the way that it was filmed was stunning. I actually watched this twice because I was so in love with it. You all know I love musicals. This was one that I really got hooked on. Andrew Lloyd Webber is of course a genius, so one of his pieces, I mean, how could I not love this? And finally, the last movie that we have to discuss with you here is one I almost forgot to put on this list, and that is Spider-Man Homecoming. So as I mentioned, I'm not a superhero person, but I've been watching more superhero movies recently. I don't know why, but like, I watched this movie I think maybe sometime in May. For whatever reason, I was like, I need to watch Spider-Man Homecoming. Everyone's been talking about this movie, I haven't watched it yet, and I need to watch Spider-Man Homecoming. And so I rented it on Amazon for like $15. Normally I would never do that, but I just had this strong desire to watch Spider-Man Homecoming. And really, I can't judge superhero movies because I'm not that big of a fan of them, and I really haven't seen any of the other Spider-Man movies, but everyone was talking about Tom Holland and Zendaya, and this seemed more up my alley than a lot of the other superhero movies because it is more teen focused. I I enjoyed it. And I have to say that if I enjoyed it, if I liked the cast and I liked the plot and I was hooked and was kept guessing, then I can't complain. So I enjoyed it and it was very fun to watch, and 2 thumbs up to Spider-Man Homecoming. I really don't have much more to say about it other than I really enjoyed it. Okay, moving on to music, we have 2 Broadway cast albums to discuss and 2 other albums to discuss, which I know comes as a surprise because I don't listen to just Broadway. I know, shocker. The first Broadway cast album I have to discuss with you is Something Rotten. So this is a play on Shakespeare and the Bard, and we follow these 2 brothers. They're pretty envious of Shakespeare and all of his success that he has, and so they pretty much want to rival him and be able to create a new piece that will be better than Shakespeare so that people will remember their stories. And it's a very witty musical in which they attempt to be able to write a musical, which is something that like would have never happened in the time, but it's great, and they parody some modern day musicals to us that were at least relevant in the time period. Christian Borle plays the Bard. Brian Darcy James is another one of our central characters. Brian Darcy James does all the things, by the way. Like in this wrap up alone, I watched him in 13 Reasons Why, Shrek the Musical, and now listen to him in Something Rotten. Man does a lot of stuff. He's a legend, by the way. I enjoyed this cast recording very thoroughly. It was hilarious, and this is definitely one that I would love to see live if I got the opportunity. And I feel like that's one of the things where this is one of those cast recordings where that makes the difference. You know, like it's one thing to listen to it, but another thing to see it live. It seems so hysterical, and I genuinely was laughing and getting into it while listening to the cast recording while editing some of my videos. I gotta give 2 thumbs up to Something Rotten. I enjoyed it. It was fun, and I'm glad that I took the opportunity to listen to it. Last Broadway cast recording that I listened to in the months of March, April, and or May is Into the Woods. So I mentioned in one of my past videos that my high school put on Into the Woods for our spring musical. I decided to listen to the original Broadway cast recording. I love Into the Woods. It's such a good show, and as I said in that last video, I think that Into the Woods was one of the best shows that our high school has put on in several years. Genuinely, I had so much fun watching all my cast members perform. It was so much fun to listen to the Broadway cast recording, and Into the Woods is just one of those timeless classics. Like, you just love it and eat it up every single time. If I have to talk about a favorite song, has to be Agony. I love me some Agony. Like, all the songs in this cast recording are wonderful, but Agony is just so good because it's hysterical to watch, and I loved watching the 2 actors that were cast as both of the princes in our show perform this number each night because I genuinely just like fell in love with it, and like even listening to the Broadway cast recording, it's just so good. I loved it. So Into the Woods, always wonderful. First album I have here to discuss with you is Voice Notes by Charlie Puth. I love Charlie Puth. I feel like I really don't talk about him at all on this channel, but I adore him. I think he's one of those writers that even though he is incredibly successful, I feel like he is still really underhyped and not enough people appreciate what it is that he does as an artist. Voice Notes, which is his sophomore album, is almost completely and entirely his own product. He produced all of it on his own, and he wrote 90% of the lyrics on his own for this entire album, which has 13 songs, I believe. There was some other people that he worked with from time to time and artists that are featured on some of the tracks on this album, but for the most part, you could say that this is entirely his own creation. That's insane because I feel like you don't see enough songwriters that are truly creating their own product. He's one of those people that's incredibly gifted and talented, and I feel like not enough people really realize it. They just listen to his songs and are like, oh, this is really good, but they don't really realize the extent to which he is involved in creating his own pieces. This man is also pitch perfect, which I think is incredibly cool, and obviously if someone has this type of talent, naturally they're gonna find themselves successful within the music industry because it's a very small amount of the population that's able to do what he is, which is pretty much if he hears a music note, whether it be from like a sneaker squeaking on the floor or an airplane going by, he's able to tell you what notes those are, like on a piano. That just like completely blows my mind because I'd never be able to do that at all. It just makes me appreciate him 10 times more as an artist, and his songs are incredibly good. They're such a jam. I love every single one of them because they're so much fun to listen to, and you know, not only do I listen to the songs for the lyrics, but now I'm actually listening to some of the background stuff that he does as well because of the way that he creates his pieces. That's the type of stuff that he does first, and that's more of where his skill comes in. It really makes me want an instrumental version of his albums. I would love particularly an instrumental version of Voice Notes where lyrics are completely stripped and you're just hearing the sounds and things that he put together, because I feel like for me, at least when I listen to songs, I focus on the lyrics more than I do anything going on in the background because that's just easier for me, and it's hard for me to take away from the lyrics and listen straight to the actual music or the instrumental piece. And so I would love a straight up instrumental version of Voice Notes. I feel like it would be so much easier to listen to what it is that he's creating created and all the layers and things that he puts on his songs, because it's so fascinating to hear him discuss a lot of those things, even though I have absolutely no idea about any of the music lingo at all. Have to talk about favorite songs. I loved absolutely all of them, so it's really hard to pick. If we're talking about songs that are strictly attached to voice notes and were not released prior at all to the album coming out, I really like Through It All. That's a beautiful song. It just was really touching to me and I really resonated to it. The Way I Am is also another really good one that I really loved, because it's one of those songs that sort of speaks to the fact of like, I'm shy and awkward and quiet and anxious, and that's me, and you have to accept me for the way that I am. And I feel like that type of message does not get preached enough, because a lot of songs that are within the pop music scene are all romance type songs, and I liked this because it was something that was just a little bit different. Through It All is also another song that's not really too romance-esque, and so I really loved both of those songs. They're beautiful. You should check out the entire album. It's so well done. I'm seeing Charlie at the end of July in concert, and I'm so excited to see him do his own show, because I've seen him on stage before, but it's only been for like 4 or 5 songs at like radio shows or like touring with another artist. Gonna be really, really cool to actually get to see him do his own show and be able to hear a full set of him performing his music, because I love and adore him and I think he's such a talented performer, and I'm so excited to get to see him, and I absolutely love Voice Notes. It's one of those albums that I have on repeat right now. Finally, to wrap this video up, we are going to be talking about Echoes of Departure and the Endless Street of Dreams, Part 1 by Logan Henderson. So yes, I was a big time Rush stan back in my day, so naturally I'm following all of the lovely boy band members in their individual careers. When Logan started to release new music, you bet your ass I had to go and listen to it, especially considering the fact that he was my favorite member of BTR back in the day. One of the things that I think is really interesting about getting to see Logan release new music is that it's very, very different than any of the BTR stuff, and I love getting to see him take a new path and really get to forge his way as an artist and be able to separate himself from all of that, because as much as I loved Big Time Rush back in the day, I do realize now that there was a lot of constraints on the type of music that they wrote, even as the boys got later on into the career in some of their later albums and they were given more creative freedom on the type of songs that they wrote. They were still put into a bit of a box because it had to be kept PG, it had to be able to be on the Nickelodeon network and cater to the Nickelodeon audience. But now that the band is over and all the guys have gone their own separate ways with their own career, it's really interesting to listen to, you know, not only Logan but Kendall and Have Run Drive and James and his own solo career, and hear the type of music they created and the type of sound that they want to establish for themselves. And I love Logan stuff because it's definitely a lot darker and a lot, I want to say, like mysterious and also kind of sexy and intriguing in a way, and I love it. As for favorite songs off of this album, which is not so much an album but like an EP because it is kind of short, I love Sleepwalker. It's so good. It was the first song of his I'd ever listened to. It sold me and I love it. It will always be a favorite of mine. Although I do love Speak of the Devil because it has such a good chorus, such a good hook. I love it. And Bite My Tongue because that also sort of is like The Way I Am. It's like I listened to the lyrics and I resonated to that song. So those 3 are definitely my favorite. I love that this album has an intro, which I think is really interesting because you don't really see that a lot. But I'm excited for part 2 if there is a part 2, because if there's a part 1 there should be a part 2. I'm really just happy for him that he's paving his own way and finding success, and I love listening to his music, and I will definitely be listening to more of it in the future because this new album and like the teases that we got from him and his new music, absolutely wonderful. That is it for part 3 of my content that I've taken in and back to Booktube series. Yay! I'm so glad this is finally done. I had so much stuff to discuss with all of you. I'm so glad to finally be back. If you would like to check me out on social media, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at GabbyYABooks with 1 Y. That is GABBYABOOKS. If you want to see what I'm reading, you can check me out on Goodreads and Teen Reads. Both of my links to those are down below. My email is also down below. If you want to email me for whatever reason, any of the things that I mentioned in this video that require links worth checking out is all in the description. So lots of fun stuff there for you to check out. You should go and do that. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time in a new video. Goodbye!
Broadway, here I come.